Here are two sentences. Mykelti Brown said both of them, in public, about the exact same family. One of them is a passionate defense. The other is a devastating accusation. They cannot both be honest, and they cannot both be true. And by the end of this deep dive, I think you will know exactly which one Mykelti actually meant, because she told us without meaning to. For years, the Sister Wives fandom has watched a family completely fall apart. But through all the legal drama, the broken marriages, and the endless bitter accusations, there was always one wild card: Mykelti. She was Christine's daughter, but for the longest time, she was the loudest voice defending her father. She was the only person who lived in both camps, acting as the ultimate insider, the bridge between Kody and Robyn's isolated world and the rest of the escaping wives. Because of this, fans hung on to her every word. When Mykelti spoke, it felt like we were finally getting the unvarnished truth. But what happens when the ultimate insider accidentally traps herself in a web of her own making? If you want to find out the shocking truth about what Mykelti tried to hide, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to Sister Wives Crew right now, so you never miss out on the real stories behind the reality TV facade. You are the jury on this one. And I mean that literally. 2 statements, 1 family. I am going to give you the evidence for both sides of this bizarre contradiction. And at the very end, I will tell you exactly where I land. But I want you to lock your verdict in right now, before I influence you. Look at the facts as they unfold and decide if she is guilty or not guilty, and decide which version of the story you think was carefully rehearsed. Once you make your choice, keep it in mind, because what you are about to hear is going to test everything you thought you knew about the Brown family dynamic. To understand how massive this mistake was, we have to look at why Mykelti matters in the first place. When Christine packed up her life and walked away, the battle lines were permanently drawn. You were either on the side of freedom, or you were stuck on Coyote Pass. But Mykelti refused to pick a side. She positioned herself as the family peacekeeper. She invited Kody and Robyn to her life events. She defended Robyn against the massive waves of online hate. She went on Patreon and social media live streams, giving paying fans exclusive theories and behind-the-scenes glimpses that you would never see on TLC. She essentially built a highly lucrative brand on being the only rational person left in the room. But living a double life requires a perfect memory. And on June 22, 2026, that perfect memory started to severely malfunction. On that late June afternoon, Mykelti's first version of the story reached over 100,000 people. She went live, and the topic turned to a heavily debated, highly controversial family meeting. Fans had been speculating for months about this specific event, a day when rumors suggest Kody allegedly laid down impossible financial and emotional ultimatums to the remaining family members. According to the whispers online, it was the final nail in the coffin. But Mykelti looked directly into the camera and offered a stunning defense. She claimed that the entire narrative was blown out of proportion. She stated very clearly that she was present on the exact day this meeting happened, placing it firmly on a specific Tuesday afternoon. She painted a picture of a heartbreaking misunderstanding. According to her June 22 broadcast, Kody was completely unaware of how his words were landing. She claimed he was exhausted, financially stressed, and that Robyn was actively trying to calm the situation down. It was a narrative that perfectly fit Mykelti's brand of protecting her father. She told her audience that the accusations surfacing online were entirely false, that Kody never intended to isolate anyone, and that the tears shed that day were born of mutual frustration, not manipulation. Fans accepted this. It made sense. When you compare this claim to the show's record, there were scenes that vaguely supported it. We had all seen Kody looking defeated, pacing around with that familiar scowl, playing the victim of a family that didn't respect him. Mykelti's story gave him an out. It provided a soft landing for a man the internet had deemed a villain. By defending him so publicly, Mykelti solidified her status as Kody's most loyal child, securing her access to his inner circle. But while the audience was taking notes, people started noticing a few strange details. The timeline she provided on June 22 was incredibly specific. She named the day of the week, she described the weather, she detailed exactly who was sitting in which chair. It was almost too perfect, like a script that had been memorized rather than a memory that was being recalled. But nobody pushed back hard enough. The internet absorbed the information, and the rumor mill quieted down. But that was not the whole story. A peacekeeper's job is never truly done, especially when there are multiple audiences to please. Mykelti's subscriber base isn't just made up of Kody sympathizers. In fact, a massive portion of her audience pays her precisely because they want to hear the dirt. They want validation for their deep-seated belief that Kody and Robyn orchestrated the downfall of the original family structure. And keeping both sides of an audience happy is a dangerous, exhausting game. You have to remember exactly what you said, who you said it to, and when you said it. If you slip up even slightly, the illusion shatters. And then came July 6th, 2026. Just 2 weeks later. 2 weeks for the first story to marinate. 2 weeks for the family dynamics behind closed doors to subtly shift. Mykelti went live again. The setup was the same. The audience was even larger, but the tone had drastically changed. Something dark was brewing just beneath the surface. She started answering questions about the exact same family meeting, the same explosive afternoon. But as the words left her mouth, fans realized something incredibly alarming. Something simply did not line up. In the two versions of her story, it wasn't the same day, and what happened next would shock everyone. On July 6th, 2026, the second telling of the story completely derailed the narrative she had so carefully constructed. As she spoke to her viewers, the tone was distinctly colder, sharper, and noticeably calculated. She started recounting the details of that exact same family meeting, the one that supposedly tore everything apart. But this time, she explicitly stated that the meeting happened on a Thursday evening. She described the house being dark, the mood being incredibly tense, and most importantly, the entire motive behind the conversation was flipped upside down. According to this new July version, Kody wasn't an exhausted, misunderstood father trying to keep his family together. Rumors suggest Mykelti painted a much darker picture, claiming Kody was highly agitated, throwing down aggressive ultimatums with absolute precision. She alleged that he knew exactly how much damage his words were causing. And Robyn? In the June version, Robyn was the desperate peacemaker. But on July 6th, reports claim Mykelti described Robyn as sitting silently in the corner, nodding along, subtly directing the flow of Kody's anger. It was no longer a story of a tragic misunderstanding. It was a direct accusation of a coordinated ambush. When you put these two broadcasts side by side, the seam doesn't just show, it completely rips apart. You cannot have a spontaneous, emotionally explosive meeting on a sunny Tuesday afternoon and also have that exact same meeting on a dark Thursday evening. You cannot have a father who is oblivious to his own harsh tone and simultaneously have a father who is executing a calculated psychological attack. The words changed. The intent changed. The villains changed. And the moment those words left her mouth, the live chat reportedly froze before exploding into utter chaos. Fans instantly recognized the contradiction. They started pulling clips, comparing the transcripts, and flooding her comments with the exact same question. Wait, didn't you just say the exact opposite 2 weeks ago? Mykelti had walked straight into a trap of her own making. The knockout blow wasn't delivered by a hater or a critic. It was delivered by her own digital footprint. But why would she do this? To understand the massive shift in her story, we have to look at the escalating stakes of her chosen profession. Mykelti isn't just chatting with friends on the internet, she is running a business. Her product is her family's trauma, and her customers are the reality TV fans who are desperate for the inside scoop. Over the years, she built a highly lucrative Patreon account, charging fans monthly fees for exclusive theories and behind-the-scenes gossip that TLC legally couldn't show. But the reality TV economy is incredibly demanding. When you promise your paying subscribers earth-shattering secrets every single week, eventually, you run out of real secrets. The well of truth dries up, and when that happens, the financial pressure to keep those subscription numbers high becomes overwhelming. Rumors suggest that in late June, right around the time of her first broadcast, Mykelti noticed a significant dip in her viewership. The Kody defense narrative had run its course. The audience was bored. They didn't want to hear about Kody being a misunderstood victim anymore. They wanted the villain they had grown to hate. They wanted red meat. And so, on July 6th, she served it to them. This brings us to the most fatal behavioral flaw in Mykelti's character, a flaw that has been deeply documented by longtime viewers of the show. She has a chronic, almost desperate need to play the chameleon. Growing up in a massive, fractured polygamous family, survival often meant telling the adult in the room exactly what they wanted to hear. If she was with Christine, she was the supportive daughter championing her mother's independence. If she was visiting Kody and Robyn, she was the loyal child, agreeing with their perspective to maintain her access to the household. She survived the chaos of her childhood by becoming a mirror to whoever she was standing in front of. And she took that exact same survival mechanism into her online career. When her audience was filled with Kody sympathizers, she gave them the Tuesday Peacemaker story. When the Christine and Janelle loyalists started demanding answers, she handed them the Thursday Ambush story. She was trying to be all things to all people, completely forgetting that the internet records everything. As the backlash mounted, the credibility dilemma became a heavy chain around her neck. She was caught in an impossible double bind. If the June 22nd version was the truth, then on July 6th, she deliberately lied to thousands of people to financially capitalize on her father's destruction. But if the July 6th version was the reality, it meant that for weeks, if not years, she had been actively covering up incredibly toxic behavior to protect her own status within Kody's inner circle. Either she was a ruthless opportunist, or she was a complicit enabler. There was no third option. She had backed herself into a corner where both exits required her to admit she was a fraud. And that is when the panic truly set in. Realizing that her audience was turning on her, Mykelti attempted a desperate emotional appeal. Reports claim she went live again, hoping to do some heavy damage control. But instead of taking accountability for the massive discrepancy, she tried to play the victim card. She appeared visibly shaken, claiming that the stress of the family's public unraveling had severely clouded her memory. She suggested that being caught in the crossfire between her parents had caused her to mix up days, times, and intentions. She leaned heavily into the language of trauma, hoping that her viewers would feel sorry for her and let the contradiction slide. She wanted them to believe that this was just a harmless memory lapse from a grieving daughter, but the emotional appeal failed spectacularly. The inauthenticity was glaringly obvious. The audience didn't buy the tears because they could clearly see the strategic manipulation behind them. A memory lapse is forgetting what you had for breakfast or mixing up who drove the car to the store. A memory lapse is not completely rewriting the psychological intent of 3 different people and shifting the entire moral foundation of a story just to appease a different segment of your paying audience. Fans quickly pointed out that her so-called clouded memory only seemed to act up when it was financially convenient for her narrative. The comment sections grew highly critical, with former supporters stating that the tears felt completely rehearsed. They felt manipulated. They realized that the person who had promised to guide them through the reality TV facade was secretly building a much more deceptive one of her own. And the consequences of this realization would change her standing in the family forever. The thematic hypocrisy of this entire situation is what makes it so incredibly compelling to watch unfold. For years, Mykelti's main selling point, the entire foundation of her online brand, was that she was the anti-reality TV star. She constantly criticized the editing on TLC, telling her followers that the network manipulated timelines and spliced conversations together to create fake drama. She promised her paying subscribers that if they came to her, they would get the unedited truth straight from the source. Yet, by telling 2 completely different versions of the exact same deeply traumatic family event, she proved that she was doing the exact same thing. She became her own reality TV producer. She was writing scripts, reading the audience's reaction, and then doing a second take with a brand new storyline to see if it would perform better. The person who promised to expose the reality TV facade had secretly built a much more deceptive one of her own. And the moment the audience realized they were being produced, the trust evaporated entirely. So how do we explain this massive failure? When you look at the raw footage of these 2 deeply conflicting broadcasts, you are essentially left with 3 possible explanations: memory, pressure, or intent. Let's look at them fairly, giving each one equal weight, because the truth usually hides somewhere in the middle. The first explanation is memory. We have to acknowledge that growing up in a fractured, highly toxic environment leaves deep psychological scars. Is it possible that her memory is genuinely fractured? When you are constantly surrounded by yelling, ultimatums, and shifting family dynamics, the days might truly start to blur together. A Tuesday afternoon and a Thursday evening might become indistinguishable when every single day feels like an emotional battlefield. Under this lens, the contradiction wasn't a malicious lie. It was the tragic result of a traumatized brain trying to piece together an incredibly painful chapter of her family's history, failing to keep the facts straight under the glaring spotlight of a live audience. But then there is the second explanation: pressure. The suffocating weight of the creator economy. When your entire income relies on keeping reality TV fans engaged, the pressure to deliver shocking content is immense. If rumors are true that her subscriber numbers were plummeting in late June, the panic of losing her livelihood might have pushed her into a corner. In this scenario, Mykelti wasn't confused about the timeline. She just panicked. She looked at her declining analytics and decided to give the people exactly what they wanted to hear. She swapped the Tuesday peacemaker narrative for the Thursday ambush narrative, simply because the algorithm demanded a villain. It's a ruthless business, and the pressure to survive financially might have temporarily overridden her moral compass, causing her to sacrifice her own father's reputation just to keep the super chats rolling in. And finally, we have the third explanation: pure intent. This is the theory that she knew exactly what she was doing every step of the way. Under this lens, Mykelti is a highly calculated player who was maliciously working both sides of the fence to maintain ultimate control. The June broadcast was intentionally designed to appease Kody and Robyn, keeping her in their good graces and securing her access to their house. The July broadcast was intentionally designed to appease the massive anti-Kody fanbase, securing her financial independence. She thought she was smart enough to manipulate two different audiences at the same time without them ever talking to each other. She wasn't traumatized, and she wasn't just pressured. She was entirely intentional, playing a high-stakes game of chess with her family's real-life collapse. When you weigh all three of these options, the resolution becomes incredibly grim, because the saddest explanation is actually the third one. If this was pure intent, if she deliberately rehearsed these conflicting stories, it means that she no longer looks at her family as a family. She looks at them strictly as content. It means the real-life pain of her mother's, the isolation of her siblings, and the destruction of her parents' marriages are nothing more than plot points for her to twist and monetize. And if that is true, it is the most tragic outcome of all. She didn't just sell out her family, she sold out her own credibility. And in the end, it cost her everything. This brings us to the ultimate reality check: the total and complete isolation of Mykelti Brown. Reports and rumors circulating behind the scenes suggest that the fallout from this double broadcast disaster has been absolute. She used to be the bridge between the two warring camps of the Brown family, but right now, that bridge has been burned to ash. It's been said that Kody and Robyn were made aware of the July 6th broadcast, and they viewed her sudden shift from defense to accusation as the ultimate betrayal. She is no longer their safe harbor. She is a liability who cannot be trusted with their private conversations. On the other side, Christine and the rest of the original family members allegedly saw the June 22nd broadcast, where Mykelti aggressively defended Kody's toxic behavior and felt completely gassed. They realized she was willing to rewrite their trauma just to play the peacemaker. Because she tried to play both sides, she is now trusted by neither. The ultimate insider has reportedly been locked out of the house. She reached the point of no return. The internet never forgets, and more importantly, the reality TV fandom never forgives fraud. The comment sections on her videos have fundamentally shifted. They are no longer filled with fans thanking her for her honesty. They are filled with amateur detectives dissecting every single word she says, waiting for the next lie to slip out. She is trapped in a contradiction loop of her own design. Every time she tries to clarify the story, she just digs the hole deeper, adding new details that conflict with the old ones. The illusion is permanently broken. She thought she could outsmart the audience, but the audience was taking notes the entire time. Which brings us right back to where we started. You are the jury on this one, and I mean that literally. 2 statements, 1 family. I gave you the evidence for both: the shifting timelines, the changing villains, and the undeniable financial motives. I told you at the beginning I would let you know where I land. Looking at the exact wording, the perfectly placed pauses, and the dramatic shifts in tone between June and July, my verdict is locked in. I believe she is guilty of producing her own fake reality. But this isn't about what I think. This is about what you think. And I want to see exactly where this audience stands. One word. That's all I want. Not a paragraph, not an essay. One word in the comments for what you think this was. Mine is rehearsed. Yours might be scared, might be true. Drop the word and nothing else. I want to see which word wins.